All right, so we're transporting the patient. We're doing our reassessment, talking to the patient, make sure that all their facts are. A lot of times these guys will have a lot of personal equipment that you'll be required to carry, medicines and everything. So you want to make sure that they get all that back. You don't want to be hanging on and have to go back to the hospital. Give them their medicines back. Okay, so you're en route. As you continue to provide care, you have to notify the hospital. You'll see when you're transporting patients that they're either by cell phone or by radio. They will call the hospital, tell the hospital what you have. The only time that they may not do that is if they're going to Parkland. The only time Parkland really wants to hear from you if you have a CPR. Otherwise, you just come in and get assigned as you go in. Most all the other hospitals, they want you to call them. It is a courtesy that you call them, let them know, and they get sort of bent if you don't. So it's always good to notify the hospital. And then start gathering up all the data that you can when you go into the hospital. It's very important when you guys do your EMS write-outs that you stay in the room with the person that's giving the verbal report or the handoff to the nurse or doctor. You want to hear that part as what they're saying to the nurse as they hand the patient off. That's an important aspect of patient care that you're going to be involved in. You'll have the tendency to go help straighten up the ambulance and make up the cot, but you'll want to stay in and listen to the report part of it. Don't worry, the guy making the cot, he does it on his own every time that you're not there. So it's no big deal. So transfer them to the staff. You let the staff know if there's any life-threatening thing, anything that you've done to the patient. You give them oxygen. You had to defibrillate them. Anything that you do to the patient, you let that know in your verbal report to the staff. Especially if there's something taking place that you consider life-threatening. They may be real busy, all right? And you bring in this person, and they have altered mental status. And diabetic emergency, not a huge thing. Having a stroke, huge thing. So you've got to let the nurse know what you think it is. You don't want to put a patient that's having a stroke out in the hall. Right? They need to go in the room. They need to get some immediate attention. So you need to make sure that you alert the nurse or the doctor to what you believe's taking place with the patient. That's just good practice. You want to make sure that they know. And it's okay to be forward with them and say, hey, I think this person's really having a stroke. Can we move them into a room? Depending on the situation, they'll probably listen to you because they don't want to make any assumptions either, right? Okay. So, as soon as you're done, if you're working, you would do your report the same way with you guys. When you're done with your call, you'll have some charting to do on your paperwork. So make sure that you note their vital signs and do sort of a SOAP type format on what you did and your assessment findings and everything. And then after you do that, you give the personal effects to them, and you most places have a place on their tablet now. Most EMS agencies run off a computer, and they have the nurse sign the computer. I tell them it's just like UPS. You just sign the big box on the computer, and they sign, and then that care is released to the hospital. I always document that in my documentation at the end. It's patient report given to ER and care released. That way they know at the end of my report I don't have any other care. After I gave the report to the nurse, my care's over with. And then it's whatever they do. So after you terminate the call, if it's a messy call, there's probably some cleaning. You want the ambulance clean for the next call. You can't go into service with a dirty ambulance. You can't call back into service. So sometimes you may have to decontaminate the ambulance. I've been out of service more times than I can remember where we had to take the ambulance back to the station, take out the cot, sort of like what this guy's doing, but I'm not on my hands and knees, and we just get a water hose and just wash out the back of the ambulance. You know, to get all the blood off the floor and all the stuff off the floor, we just wash it out. It just goes into the drain anyway, no matter where you wash it. But so just wash it out of the back of the ambulance, but it needs to be clean. You wouldn't want your family member in that ambulance after a big nasty call and blood all over the place, right? So the cot has to be clean. There's a lot of places, when we look at the cot, you can see, hey, there could be blood there. You want to make sure that all the blood is picked up, cleaned up, and make sure that it's appropriate for the next call. Because it's sort of like a little emergency room, right? So you want to, when they call 911 and you show up, they should expect a clean ambulance. A dirty ambulance is a sign of, I don't know if I'd get inside of a dirty ambulance. It's just undisciplined crew. You always want the back of your ambulance clean. You don't want it cluttered and dirty. So restock, refuel. The standard on refueling is a half tank. It varies between services, but most of them, once you hit a half tank, you go fill up. You don't want to run out of gas. The newer ambulances are gas. The older ambulances are diesel. But if you run out of fuel, diesel fuel, that's a bad mark on you, but it essentially destroys the engine. You don't want to run out of gas, especially going to a call. You'll be held liable for that, be held responsible. So always make sure that you call the dispatch, tell them you're back in service, your ambulance is filled up. Even in a busy system, like I work in, there's always time to get gas. You know, you've got to have fuel. You got to have a clean ambulance. You know, so and then you go back to quarters, and you throw away the biohazard stuff. You clean and disinfect, get new equipment if you need it, and then you just terminate the call and wait on the next one. And then that's the beauty of it. You get through one, maybe you have some time to get a nap, study, I don't know, watch some TV. You know, depends on what's taking place. Questions there? Pretty straightforward. A lot of that stuff we'll go through practical. We'll see that when we go out to the fire department. Very good? Talk a little bit about air rescue. I've been on the other side, so I want to make sure that, setting up a landing zone or an LZ is very important. I almost got killed one night because the fire department didn't set up a good LZ. We almost hit a tower. And they were fighting a big fire, and they sent their rookies over to set up an LZ, and they didn't mark the LZ properly. They didn't tell us that there was a tower there, an unlit tower, and we were flying right towards it at 100 miles an hour. So luckily we saw the shadow before we hit it, and the pilot was skilled enough to bank off to the side, and we missed the tower. But that would have killed us all. So we weren't very happy when we got out of that helicopter with that landing crew that set up this LZ. They almost killed us. So air operations, once you get like rotor operations, rotor wing or helicopter operations, it's a matter of speed to the hospital. Not necessarily a level of care in particular, but speed, there is a higher level of care, but one thing it is that you want to get that patient from where they are to the hospital as quick as possible. So out here, for instance, if there's a big trauma out here, I would land a helicopter because the distance to a level 1 trauma center, the closest level 1 trauma center is downtown. How long does it take to get to Baylor from here, you think?
30 minutes. 30 minutes.
Yeah, 30 minutes. You can, a rule of thumb is if your driving time, you can cut your driving time in half in a helicopter. So if it takes you 30 minutes to drive there, it's going to take a helicopter 15 minutes to get there. The difference is no stoplights. Even running with the lights and sirens on, you slow down and come to almost a complete stop at a red light. You just can't go through a red light. You have to stop. The sirens, the lights and the sirens are warning everybody else to get out of your way, but it doesn't give you the right to violate the traffic laws. So you have to stop, make sure all the intersection's clear, and then proceed through. Helicopter, you fly from this point to the hospital, no roads, right? So no stop signs, so the length of the distance is shorter. And there is some high priority of patient, you know. So you use this air support, the helicopter, for them. So we're going to set up this landing zone. One thing that I'm going to try to do as well is we're going to try to do this on a practical application. We've got a beautiful landing zone here. I've landed a helicopter here before on the baseball field. We did a little thing that we might do this year as well. And we put a helicopter down there on the baseball field. So if nothing else, if we don't do the other thing we're talking about doing, I'm going to ask one of the helicopter services to come out and show you guys the helicopter, look at it, talk about the LZ and stuff, sort of to put this more in a practical application. If you're on the ambulance and you get an opportunity, you know, let's say they have a fight scene on the ambulance, make sure that you try to go over to the helicopter with them. They're not going to stop to show you the helicopter, right? Because they have a priority of getting the patient on. But you'll want to make sure that you try to get under the rotors, see how that works, all that. If you see one at the hospital, if they happen to land at the hospital, then while they're picking up the patient, if you have time to go out there and look around it on the helicopter, they'll be glad to show it. The pilot will show you around. The medical crew's inside picking people up. Didn't we do that in here? Is that this class? Last year, helicopter landing? Y'all remember that? Okay. I thought it was last year. Yeah, it was last year. Okay, so let's look at this LZ for a minute. 100 by 100, that's the standard. So a 100 square. When you're setting this up, you want to make sure that as you're looking around out, that what I tell people in an LZ class is sort of hold their hand like a high Hitler thing, all right, and walk around in a circle and look here at this viewpoint of everything that's in your path. This could be road signs, all right, light posts, all sorts of different things. Make sure there's not any ground clutter there, because when the helicopter lands, it does one of these. It comes down and it does this. So if you have a lot of trash and everything on the ground, it's going to do this. And it's going to pick up that trash. If that trash gets sucked in the engine, then that helicopter's out of service. It happens with dust or dirt as well. Snow, if you're in the cold climate, you can do a whiteout. It's called a brownout around here because we land in the dirt and dust just goes everywhere. You can't see anything. And so the helicopter has to lift up and has to pick an alternate landing zone. But ultimately, the pilot is going to, you can have a perfect landing zone, and if the pilot's not pleased with it, they're going to radio down and say, we don't like that. You need to do another LZ. So even though you do it the way you're supposed to, the pilot's coming in, he may not like it. Because what the helicopter does is that when it starts to come in, it does a high recon. So it'll come in, let's say it's going to land on this desk. So it's going to come in and it's going to do a high recon. It's going to come around and look and then it's going to come back around and do a low recon, and the pilot and the crews are looking out the windows, make sure there's nothing in their way. So with my little tower incident, we were coming in our low recon. It was a cell phone tower, which is about 100 feet off the ground or so. And we come around in our low recon, and there was the tower. And we were banked over like this. And fortunately, one of the guys said, "Is that a tower?" And the pilot saw it as well and did a hard bank away from the tower. And then they're coming in and land. So they're looking at the LZ as they're coming around. That's one of the, if you ever see it, they circle around. They look like twice, and they sort of spiral in. Right? They're always try to land into the wind. So as you're marking your LZ, suspect them to come and they land into the wind. The wind gives them the loft. So if this was the front of the helicopter, they're landing in so that the wind can get underneath them, and they're locked up like that. But so make sure that there's not any wires or posts or anything. And that's why you're in radio communication with the helicopter. That way you can tell them, okay, I have power lines to this side of the helicopter, to the landing zone. You will have to use north, south, east, and west. Right and left doesn't make any sense to them. Okay? So you say, well, to the right of the LZ, we have this. They don't know how you're standing, so they don't know what right is. It's always north, south, east, and west directions when you're setting that up and you're speaking to them. When you approach the helicopter, you always approach at the 12 o'clock. And the 12 o'clock is the front of the helicopter. So as you're doing this, you always approach towards the nose of the helicopter. Never approach towards the rear or the rotor of the helicopter. One, you're going to get yelled at by other people. But two, this is one of the danger places around it. As you approach the helicopter crew is responsible for you. So they don't get out, and typically you will only approach the helicopter with the crew. There's no reason for you to come over without the patient. So the helicopter crew, the flight crews don't get out. They don't come to you, and as you're bringing the patient over, you will approach the helicopter to the 12 o'clock. The pilot is counting the number of bodies that come in, and he counts the number of bodies that go out. So it's always -2. So if 4 goes in, 2 comes out, right? If 2 people don't come out, he won't take off because he has 2 people in there. If one person comes out and he only sees 1 person, he doesn't take off because he's waiting for one other person to come out. So you have 1 person that's unaccounted for. So you want to make sure that you do that as well. Typically, mainly all the helicopters around here load to the side. But if you have a rear-loading helicopter, usually the flight crew will stand at the back to protect you from the tail rotor. If the tail rotor hits you, your life is over. All right, in the helicopter's out of service. All right? The blades on the top, everybody gets in this. They look at the movies too much and they duck down, and they do this about the blades. Unless you're just really super tall, those blades are well above your head. All right? You don't need to necessarily duck down unless he's shutting off. As the helicopter shuts down, the blades lose power and they start to droop. So as the helicopter's spinning and they're starting to shut down, the blades are going to droop down. So you definitely don't, if that's the case, you definitely don't want to be on this end of the blade. That can hit you if you're taller than me. So it just comes right above my head. So Mary would have a problem. So she want to make sure that she stays away from the tip of the blade. Usually, when they're landing and they're waiting for a patient, the blades are still turning. There's no, it takes too long to start the helicopter. It takes about 5 minutes to start the helicopter up. So they don't turn the helicopter off unless there's a problem, or unless they're going to be there for a while, like at the hospital. So they're idling, so the blades are still up during the idle. If it happens to be on a slope, then you will have to watch out for the blades to come down. If they're landed on a slope, those blades will be down like this. Now, it's the flight crew's responsibility to tell you that. All right? But I tell everybody, I'm 5'7". If you see me duck, you should duck. All right? If I duck down going under the blades, then you should too. You know, hats. Make sure your hats are off. Hats don't blow off. You know, you don't want that. You want to make sure that when you move the patient off the cot, that you don't let the sheet go up in the air. It's quite breezy underneath the blades, and it's quite loud. So I hope you're good at lip reading, because you can't really hear too much underneath. It's too loud. All right. So hopefully you guys will get to do that. If not, then I still have plans to set something up out here. They like coming out for those LZ classes. You know, it gets them out, lets them fly. You know, and it'd be pretty interesting. Hopefully you get a flight scene maybe somewhere. That'd be even cooler. Questions? Questions on that part? Everybody good?